In the world that dictates the rules of success by 20, where each achievement is compared with other people's records, it is easy to believe that your train has gone. The social networks shout, "You are late." Millionaire bloggers barely graduated from school. Young geniuses start startups for millions while you may still look for yourself. And in this noise, an alarming question arises. Is it too late for me? But there is one fact that almost no one is talking about. The stories of truly great people rarely fit into the framework of early success. Some of the most influential, rich, and respected billionaires in history came to their peaks after they stepped over the threshold for 50 years. Not contrary to age, but thanks to everything that they lived before him. They were not noticed, they were refused, their ideas were ridiculed, and yet they continued, not for the sake of glory, and because inside them burned more than just a desire to succeed. This is not a video about a magic tablet. This video is a reminder, the fact that life does not shorten with age. She deepens. Now you will see 5 stories. Real, living, deep. The stories that began after it would seem was already too late. Stories in which age is not a point but a comma, and where 50 years is not a finish but a starting line for a new, unexpected, and great path. Fasten. Because everything you knew about time and success is about to turn over. At the age when most people are preparing for retirement, he was sitting behind the wheel of his old car, exhausting from joint pain and anxiety and tomorrow. At 52, Ray Kroc had neither large business nor condition nor stability. He sold kitchen equipment, mixers for dairy cocktails, and more often heard no than yes. His days were similar to one another: phone calls, meetings, and snacks, forever refusal to refuse. He was not a genius of technology. He had no investors and no one was going to bet on him. But inside Ray there lived an insatiable thirst for meaning. Something told him that this is not all, that his story cannot end like this, in a shabby jacket with a mixer in the trunk and a dream that no one, besides himself, was seriously perceived. And then one day, among the usual orders, he receives an application for 6 mixers from one small restaurant in California. 6, it was unusual. He decides to personally go and see who these people are and why they needed so many technology. When he arrived, he saw an institution working like a clock, a simple menu, a lightning pitch, satisfied customers. Everything was so effective and naturally that it seemed it was not just a restaurant, it was a drawing of the future. This institution was ruled by the McDonald brothers. They had a system. They had an idea. But they did not have one. Vision of the scale. And Ray Kroc had it. He saw in this tiny snack window not just a business. He saw a global empire that no one had yet dared to build. He was in 50, but he felt that his whole past life was only a preparation for this meeting. He offered a franchise. He ran into resistance. He was ridiculed, dissuaded, warned, but he walked forward. First, 1 point, then 2, then dozens, and each new restaurant became a brick in the colossal structure that McDonald's later called. He did not just sell food, he sold the idea of the standard, speed, recognition. He created a business language that became universal. But the path was not smooth. There were legal battles, betrayal, financial risks. There were times when everything hung in the balance. He had to fight not only competitors but also with internal demons, doubts, fatigue, fear. The world was in no hurry to accept it. He was too old, too stubborn, too ambitious. But he knew one thing: if not now, then never. At the time of purchase of McDonald's from the brothers, he was already far over 60. But it was then that his name began to be associated with the most famous fast food network in the world. At 69, he became a multimillionaire, not because he was lucky, and because he did not give up when everyone else had already dropped his hands, because he continued to see the light where others saw the closed door. Ray Kroc was not a young genius. He was a tired man with a big dream, and he proved that age is not an obstacle to greatness. On the contrary, he can be his catalyst. His story is a reminder that it becomes late only when you believed in it, and that is why his path did not end at a restaurant in California. He was just beginning. In the noise of the digital era, where millions of voices strive to be heard, there is one story that reminds that a real resonance does not come when you are louder than anyone, but when you speak from the depths. The story of Arianna Huffington is not about glossy success, not about a light path to the top. This is a story about a woman whose recognition did not come to 20, not to 30, but when society is already habitually turning away from those who began late. By the age of 40, she was a famous writer, a political commentator, an intellectual. She was respected but not always listened. It was read but not perceived as a creator who can change the field of the information landscape itself. She herself admitted, despite the publications and television broadcasts, there was a feeling that she was only on the side of the real influence. And all this time, something has matured in it. The idea, strength, a platform that was supposed to be born but still did not find a form. In 2005, at the age of 54, she launched the Huffington Post, a site that was originally perceived as a bold, but not too serious project. Skeptics smirked condescendingly. Blog, at this age? No one then knew that this idea was hidden not just the need to speak, but a desire to listen. Really. Give a voice to those who are ignored. Combine journalism with human sincerity, political comment with personal pain, analytics with vulnerability. Arianna understood that the world was changing. She felt the pulse of society, its fatigue from formalities, his craving for authenticity. And she created not just a news site, but a space where the reader felt, here you can be yourself. They hear here. Here they write not about events, but about people within these events. The path was not easy. In the first months, the site was stiffly criticized. Someone reproached him for excessive liberality. Someone is in the absence of professionalism. There were cyber attacks, technical failures, disputes with editors. But all this was only a background to how quickly HuffPost began to grow. People began to read, share, trust, because they felt, this is not just news. This is a mirror of the era. When in 2011, AOL acquired Huffington Post for $315 million, the world was shocked. Not only because of the amount, but also because it turned out, a woman over 50 can not only compete in the digital world, but to form his rules. Arianna did not stop. She continued to reform media, talk about mental health, fatigue, balance between work and life. She introduced into the agenda that he had been silent for decades, but the price was hidden behind external success. Exhausting. Graphs, sleepless nights, physical exhaustion. She herself once lost consciousness from overwork and hit her head on the edge of the table. This moment has become a turning point for her. She realized, the success built on self. Destruction is an illusion. And it was from this point that her new mission began, to talk about internal well-being, not as weakness, but as a higher form of force. Arianna Huffington did not change the world right away, but she changed him deeply, and she did it at the young age when the world was already ready to forget about her. She did not become younger, she became louder, more confident, more precisely, because her voice no longer needed approval. He proceeded from the depths that only years give, lived, meaningful, suffered. Her path is not about the elevation of a woman in the media. This is about the power of maturity. The fact that after 50 does not end in life. She is just starting to speak in a real language. And if you have something to say to the world, the age should not be a reason to shut up. Because sometimes we pronounce the most important words when, finally, we cease to rush. When we think about the inventions that have changed the world, rarely any of us will think about how many years a person was when he created his great product. We are used to believe that real success is quick achievements, the lightning success of young geniuses. But James Dyson proved that innovations are not dependent on age, and sometimes they only become brighter and more powerful every year when a person has something to say and what to achieve. At the age of 45, James Dyson was not a person who could easily lead the list of the most successful entrepreneurs of Great Britain. He was already a mature engineer, but his name was not yet associated with great inventions. But his passion for improvement, it was she that was the motor that led him to success. It was at this age that he began to work on what will later become his main invention, a vacuum cleaner without a bag. The idea came to Dyson not by chance. He was irritated that the vacuum cleaners that he used lost power as soon as their bags were filled with dust. He realized that there was a huge potential for improvement. At that time, there were no vacuum cleaners in the world that would not lose effectiveness in the process. However, instead of being content with a simple decision, Dyson decided to go further. His path to success was not easy. Dyson developed 5,126 different prototypes before he came up with the same vacuum cleaner with a cyclone technology that became the basis of his business. At this time, his life was not full of recognition. He faced numerous refusals, both from large manufacturers of vacuum cleaners and investors. All of them laughed at his idea. In addition, family and friends did not support him. But it was precisely this perseverance, this incredible faith in his idea, which led him to success. Many would have surrendered after dozens of unsuccessful attempts. But James Dyson continued. He took his equipment and began to create his own vacuum cleaners that could work without bags. He began to sell them in the UK, and despite the initial difficulties, his invention gradually began to respond to consumers. At first, he used lower price categories and aimed at a small market, but his technology continued to improve. However, his success was not only in creating a working product, he was able to change the perception of the entire market. Dyson vacuum cleaners have become a synonym for quality and innovation. He taught the world that technology should be not only effective, but also beautiful, convenient to use, aesthetically attractive. His company, Dyson, eventually became the world leader in the field of household appliances, and Dyson himself became one of the most successful and respected entrepreneurs of Great Britain. When he was over 50, he already established himself as the founder of a large technological company, but his success was not instant. He became a multimillionaire only after many years of hard work. In his history, there is no myth about quick success. This is a story about how persistence and faith can change life even in adulthood. After all, his first successful Demols cleaner was released only after he experienced considerable financial difficulties and almost lost everything. Dyson not just developed a new vacuum cleaner model, he turned the whole industry. He was not afraid to abandon the standards and familiar solutions, offering a completely new approach to solving the old problem. This confidence in her own idea, despite criticism and doubts, made it not only a successful entrepreneur, but also an example for thousands of people who were disappointed in their endeavors. Now, looking back at the success of James Dyson, we see him not only as a billionaire, but also as a person who, throughout his life, embodied the idea of continuous improvement. Despite successes, he continues to develop new technologies, improving not only household appliances but also our perception of what can be done better. His story is evidence that age is not a restriction for those who are not afraid to dream and act. Its achievements go beyond the borders of a regular business. He inspires us that it is never too late to start. At the age when others could think about how to lay down a weapon, Dyson proved that in fact the most important thing is not how many years to you, but how many years of your idea and your desire for perfection. James Dyson, like many others, proved that innovations have no statute of limitations, and that perhaps the best version of yourself and your ideas comes precisely at the moment when you cease to get hung up at age and begin to look at the world through the eyes of the real inventor. When we think about great entrepreneurs who could imagine that a man who on the threshold of 60 years was a bankrupt owner of a small restaurant will become the founder of one of the most recognizable companies in the world, the Harlan Sanders column was perhaps the most amazing example of how age may not be an obstacle, but a catalyst for the implementation of a great business. Sanders was born in 1890 in a poor family, and his life from the very beginning was full of difficulties. He lost his mother early and was forced to work in various low-paid positions in order to support himself. At the age of 40, Sanders opened a small institution on cooking in Kentucky, which soon went bankrupt. His life was full of failures, and he did not know how to move on. However, it was this moment that became a turning point for him. After bankruptcy, he did not give up. Instead of going into the shadow, Sanders decided to continue. At 62, he sold his old car to launch his new business, a restaurant where only one product was sold, a fried chicken prepared according to his own recipe. It was unusual for the time when restaurants offered a wide range, but it was in this restriction that the power of his idea was hidden, to focus on one dish and make it unsurpassedly tasty. Sanders used a secret recipe that contained 11 herbs and spices and presented it as something unique. However, at the very beginning, it was not easy for him. His restaurant was not popular, and his method of cooking chicken was so complicated that no one wanted to recreate his recipe. His life at that moment was not visible of any success, only debts, lack of support and despair. But Sanders did not stop. He began to ride in America, selling his idea of the restaurant franchise. Each refusal was like a nail in his cowardly closing cover. He felt tired, old, and exhausted. He survived many failures, but continued. He was one of those people who, despite his age, was ready to work to the end because he knew that his idea had something important that could change the world. At the age of 65, after he went around 1,009 restaurants, he signed the first franchise contract. But this was not the end of his struggle. Sanders continued to expand his business, despite the fact that he had to deal with various difficulties. His story is full of struggle and determination, and he overcame many obstacles, including lack of finances, age-related restrictions, and public stereotypes. He tried to sell his franchise again and again, despite constant refusals. By the age of 70, when his name became a synonym for high-quality fried chicken, Sanders sold his business for $2 million. It was a huge amount, especially for that time. And although at the time of sale he was already 73 years old, his success was not instant. It was not lightning, fast glory, but a difficult and persistent struggle that began late, but ended with a triumph. However, even after he sold the business, Sanders continued to be the face of KFC, promoting him as a cult figure with a red shirt and a white tie. He himself became a living symbol that it was never too late to start. His name became known around the world, and his chicken is a symbol of quality and taste. The story of the Sanders column is not just about how a man became a billionaire. This is a story about how one failure can be the beginning of everything. This is a story about how a person, despite the advanced age and all refusals, can find his goal, return faith to himself, and change the world. His life reminds us that great achievements do not depend on when you start, but on how much you want. At the age when many would begin to think about pensions, Sanders columns created one of the most successful brands in the world. And even if your path is thorny, if you are surrounded by doubts and fears, it is important to remember, old age is not a barrier. She is an opportunity. So we came to the end of our story about 5 incredible people who proved that it was never too late for greatness. Ray Kroc, Arianna Huffington, James Dyson, and Sanders columns showed us that success does not depend on age. They faced difficulties, doubts, and refusals, but continued to move forward, finding the strength to believe in their dreams and ideas. Their stories are inspiration for all of us. Если вы чувствуете, что ваше время еще впереди, то помните, все возможно, когда есть желание и стремление. Независимо от того, сколько вам лет, важно не останавливаться и идти к своей цели. Ваши мечты могут стать реальностью, и этот путь еще только начинается. Если вам понравился этот контент, не забудьте поставить лайк, чтобы поддержать нас и помочь этому видео достичь большего числа людей, которым может быть полезна эта мотивация. Подпишитесь на канал, чтобы не пропустить новые истории успеха и вдохновения. И, конечно же, напишите в комментариях, какой из этих примеров вдохновил вас больше всего, или поделитесь своей собственной историей. Мы с радостью прочитаем ваши мысли. Спасибо за просмотр и помните, неважно, сколько вам лет. Важно, что вы готовы продолжать двигаться вперед.